Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hello,
Wow.
everyone. We're missing our regular bumper tonight. Our excuses for that, I guess. I don't know what happened to our bumpers, but I have been unable to find them. Oh, look at that.
Hey, there
It
we are.
says Tuesday. Hey, Martin, do you? Oh,
It's
never
all
mind.
Martin's doing.
That's
Hey,
Martin. Yeah, apparently so.
what's my doing?
Oh, we missed that. We didn't have our starts available, so we missed the start. But that's okay. It's
Yeah, we
Oh,
okay.
didn't have
are,
the
are we live right now?
Yeah, we
Yes,
are.
Hello, sorry. Hi, everybody. Welcome to
just
Wednesday Wham.
just in time. Yes, and
Yes.
I have been looking for something that I've got missing here in the studio, but I'll stop that and pay attention to what's going on now.
Show them what I sent you, Rob, from
Oh
last week.
yes,
We were talking
because
about this last week.
you showed these last time, and I said I wouldn't mind having them, and
So
then I'm showing you my best side now.
yeah.
These guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
I sent
Yeah,
them to Rob.
she wanted to sell them, and she gave me a decent price on them. I said sure, send her the money, and she sent me these, and they came 2 days later. So
That's
Very
right.
nice.
very cool. Yeah, now I've been wanting something like that for a while, but the price on them is so dang high
Yeah.
that
Well, they were missing all their little hands. You know, they
yeah,
came.
and some of the joints are a little loose, but they're still usable. So and that's all I care about. They don't have to be
All
perfect.
right. My name is Barb Kilberg. For anybody who doesn't know by now, I am the creator of Divinity for Silverline. I'm also an inker on various projects, including one that I'm working on with Rob for Silverline. I'm working on some couple of projects outside of Silverline that I can't talk about. And I am the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for Silverline. And I mention that because that's going to be come into play later tonight during the podcast. I'm very much of a right brain, left brain type of person, which is unusual. I have a very analytical mind on one part, but a very creative mind on the other part. And you'll see some of that as we go on. So, to my, what is this direction? Over here.
That's your left. That's
All right.
your left. Yeah.
You want to introduce yourself, Martin?
Oh, hello. I'm Martin Mertonen, and I'm the colorist on the wonderful book Wolf Hunter. We just finished up issue number 2, coloring it, and it is in the bag. I haven't heard any comments back from the head cheese, so I guess it's good.
No
Jeez.
good. No news. Good news. Right.
What would be the or the name of our head honcho on Silverline? What would that be? What would be the top of the Silverline? The Silverline, the
chief,
head, Chief Thread.
bottle washer, head and chief bottle washer.
Anyways, yes,
the
rolling.
headlight. The headlight on the front of the Silverline train.
Sure. There you go,
Although
Silverline.
we really know who's behind that,
Yeah.
right? It's BJ.
So I've colored a couple of books. I've done a couple of comic books here and there, and I've done some lettering for some other stuff. And and I just enjoy the comics creation process. So,
Yeah,
and down below us,
it's head honcho and chief bottle washer. That's it.
well, not he's not the head
Not
honcho,
me.
the chief bottle
He's
washer.
the
No.
venerable. He's Mr. Venerable.
He's the venerable.
And my career is kind of in parallel with Barb's. I've been in the industry for approximately 38 years, moving in on 39 or 40. And I started out as a letterer, became an inker, then a penciler. I've worked for Marvel. I worked for DC. I worked for Malibu. I worked for Innovation. I work for Now Comics, which I don't like to talk about, but yes, I broke in at Now Comics, and it's that's kind of apropos to what we're talking about tonight, which is indie comics, and that's where I broke in and where most folks broke in. But
Hmm.
if you know me at all, my one claim to fame is having worked on the Star Trek books for Malibu and DC in the late 1980s, early 1990s. So as a penciler primarily. So there we go.
Hmm. Well, the object of tonight's podcast is talking about the importance of having the smaller independent comic book companies in the industry and what they do to enhance our industry. So many people have grown up on just DC and Marvel, and that's great. I did too, and I've worked for DC and Marvel. I worked for DC for a decade, and almost as long for Marvel. They're great. I love them. I'm a Marvel girl. But I think that our lives are incredibly enriched by the advent of the indies. I know the indies have been around for a long, long time, especially underground comics, which there was a huge underground movement here in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh,
But-
really?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't learn about it till long after it had kind of died off, but yes.
Yeah. In fact, one of the major underground movers and shakers is now a teacher at the University of Wisconsin who teaches comics. But in the last couple of decades, indies have really begun to shine. And as Rob just mentioned, a lot of creators, including myself, they start out in indies. And I think that's because for one thing, it's very difficult to break into the big two or the big three if you're an Image fan. And indies can foster new talent. You can get into the industry by coming into the smaller companies, and they will foster young talent and allow you to grow, create a portfolio. One of the biggest achievements is to just get published.
Yeah.
Get something on your resume. Oh yeah, I've worked for so and so. It allows you to create a portfolio that you can show while also getting tutorials and editorial feedback from a smaller company. I started out at Eternity Comics, actually, doing gray washes. And yeah, on Tiger X.
Yeah, and that's a great story you tell about that too.
Yeah.
You never done gray washes before.
No,
that either, had you?
I lied my ass off. And it's funny that Tom Mason now is here with us on Silverline because I lied my ass off to get that job. They said, "Oh, do you know how to do gray washes?" I'm like, "Sure, no problem." Didn't know what the hell a gray wash was, but I said hi anyway, or I said, absolutely, I can do that. Yep. Fake it till you make it.
That's it. That's it.
But that allowed me to get my foot in the door, and then I moved from there to inks. Like I said, I did gray washes on Ben Dunn's Tiger X, and from there I moved on to inking, and then into Adventure Comics. From Eternity, I went to Adventure Comics, all under the same umbrella of Malibu.
More or less, yeah.
And I did Planet of the Apes, and then from there I moved up to Malibu's Ultraverse, and from there on it was clear sailing. Innovation, Now Comics. I worked for Warp Graphics. I worked for, Phil Folio. I've worked for so many different small companies and the large companies. And coming full circle and going from the large companies back down to the small companies, I've learned to look at the big picture, and see exactly what it is that independent comics brings to the industry. And having now talked my head off, Rob, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, mine aren't too different from yours. I think that's the training ground for the guys who end up being pros at the big two. But personally, I see that the industry is beginning to kind of turn on its head, and I really think the more interesting and the more exciting books are coming out from the independents, not the big two anymore. I really think that, like I said, it's starting to turn on its head. I in the day, X-Men was on the book everybody wanted to get on so they could make their name in the industry, and it was true that if you drew the X-Men, you could write your ticket on where else you could go.
Same with
But
Batman, Superman, and Avengers. And I always wanted Avengers.
yeah, I early in my career, I had a desire to work on superhero comics and do that sort of work. But as I got into the industry, I found that my style didn't lend itself to that. So I focused more on the realistic stuff that was TV adaptations and that sort of thing. I went more for a cinematic look than a in your face, foreshortening stuff.
Hi, Pops.
And that kind of shrank where I could work in the industry. But in the indies, in the independents, that's a lot of what they were doing was stuff that was completely different, going for different styles and such. So I kind of focused on them more than working for DC or Marvel. And I think that again, it's even today there are different stages of independence as well. There's the really little guys, kind of like Silverline, and then there's the bigger guys like Dark Horse, and I still consider Image to be an indie, although it's got as big a sales as the big two does. And
DC, anyway.
Yeah, DC. So it's but again, I think the industry is starting to flip, and that I think the more interesting and more exciting stuff is coming out from the independent publishers.
And Mr. Voom says, started reading independent comics in 1985 when I saw FemForce. I remember FemForce.
I do too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Innovation had a version of FemForce that I worked on, and I'll be damned if I can remember the name of it.
I know what you're talking about. They had Justice Machine as well, but that wasn't like FemForce. That was different.
Yeah, I also worked for Valiant and oh God, I can't remember all the companies. Dark Horse.
Yeah.
Yep. He says I have books for all of those companies, Barb. Yep, fun and entertaining they were. Yep. Martin, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the independents were an important catalyst in the sense of pushing comics around. So I was always I would look at the big two, but I was always interested in what other people that were outliers were doing, because it was always the guys that were kind of like on the fringes that were doing stuff that was a little bit different and strange and odd and taking things and making challenging stuff. But you had everything in that indie bracket, kind of from like the amateur guy who was still getting his feet wet and trying to figure out how stuff goes. And some of those guys were fairly consistent, but you could still see that like they weren't quite there, but they still had something interesting going on. But then there was other guys that were like pushing the envelope and doing some really interesting stuff. And you're like, whoa, like, okay, what's going on here? Like, and so, yeah, so I think the independents are quite important. But no, what constitutes independent? So, like you mentioned, Image is a peculiar animal because it's a banner of a large, ginormous group of independent books. If that makes any sense. So it's like, okay, but there's something that makes an Image book an Image book. If that makes anything, if that's so. DC has its look, Marvel has its look, and it's interesting to see when guys cross over, how things kind of shift. You can still see that it's their art, but like you're like, oh, you're kind of telling your stories in a different paradigm. But now there was like Boom Studios. Now, is that considered independent, or is that like, what is that like? What, like, they're a corporation of some kind, right?
Okay,
So
I'll tell you what.
So So I'm curious as to where the line
Yeah.
starts getting drawn. Now this is really interesting because you also have guys that you could call independent artists that end up under a corporate banner,
Hmm.
but their art is kind of like an outlier.
Right.
So is that still considered independent? Like, so this is a very interesting question. So, is independent like Silverline us as a animal, like like we're the brand Silverline. What makes us indie?
I
We're
So
not
can
DC
kind
or
of
Marvel.
answer that for you. I can kind of answer that for you.
Yeah.
And this goes back to when we first came on. I said I'm very left brain, right brain. So I did some numbers crunching. Okay, no spreadsheets were involved. Roland, just let you know that for once, I did not break out the spreadsheets. But the comic book market, the U.S. comic book market, breaks down like this. In the second quarter of 2024, Marvel had 39.2% of the market share. DC had 17.8. Now that's quite a difference. 39.2% as opposed to 17.8% of the market share. Image had
Almost
12.
half. Yeah.
Image had 12.9% of the market share, which left everybody else in a big lump, and all the others had 30.1%. So 30% of the industry is independent. They're below the the 10% or 12% mark. So the top three by far companies are Marvel, DC, and Image, and 30% of the rest of the industry is broken down into the smaller companies.
All kinds
But
of little pieces. Yep.
that tells you that 30% is made up of the independents. Now that's a lot bigger share than it was a decade, 2 decades ago.
Hmm.
When it was
Interesting.
probably more like 90% DC Marvel and 10% indies. So that is an indication right there that the indies have really made a mark on the market.
The conglomeration of independent comics is a bigger portion of the industry than DC is.
Mhm.
Right. Marvel was the biggie, and the DC was the second one.
39% Marvel,
Yeah.
17% DC. So the indies are they fall between DC and Marvel.
Yeah. If you put them in one
Yep.
one bag,
Mhm.
they would make up a bigger portion, almost than the combined of DC and Image.
Yep.
Almost that. So, wow. Yeah, that's
Does that surprise you?
again, it is turning itself on its head. The
Does that
industry is
surprise you?
turning itself on its head. Within, and it could eat into that 39% and become as a bigger portion than either of the big two.
It has continued to grow.
It's going that direction. So
Right.
yeah,
So where would you stick things like Scholastic and
Now we're just talking to comic book market.
yeah, no, but they put out comic
they put
books.
out graphic novels. They put out graphic novels
So
That would be included in
to the
the
book market.
30%.
Yeah.
they'd be included in the what, sorry?
That would probably be included in the indie market because it's, I suppose.
Right. So yeah, so it's interesting. So the book market, various publishers have gone into producing graphic novels, and in a big way too. Like we had a bookstore up here. I don't know if it's still around or not because they've been shutting locations down. But they called it Chapters up here. It's kind of like your Kohl's or your W.H. Smith, or I can't remember what all the book companies. haven't been in a
Barnes and
bookstore.
Noble. Barnes and Noble is what we have here.
It's kind of like
It's the only
you know,
one. It's the only big one left anymore.
Yeah.
Most of the rest of them are independent bookstores. So
Right. Yeah. But I mean, they had like huge sections of just like all the book publishers that gone into graphic novels or books, comic type books, which is really fascinating. And they kind of created a different animal, if you could call it that. So yeah, and I don't know how well that's thriving or not, but they did create something.
I think another big thing that you can say about indies is that, and this is a direct quote, I'm going to read it to you. It can be attributed to a growing desire for diverse original storytelling that steps outside the traditional boundaries set by the giants of the comic book world. See that?
Right.
And that's a big draw to a lot of people.
Yeah.
They're tired of the same old, same old. They want something new and fresh.
Yep.
And unlike the creative constraints that you find in the larger companies, it allows you for a broader range of styles and narratives and groundbreaking works that push the envelope. They focus on, a lot of indies will focus on their own little niches that people feel like they've been ostracized from, and they can't find those niches in the larger corporations. You get out from underneath the corporate umbrella and you have a lot more freedom.
You know, they're mostly since they have trademarked characters that the company itself owns.
Right.
Their self-interest is in keeping those marketable and keeping them within a certain you know, a tunnel that
Right.
they can't break out of, because you can't have well, they have had Superman kill somebody, or just go outside of what he was before to
Right.
make him an unmarketable character. You don't want to push the edges too much,
Well, no, they've
because
got
you've
an
got
established universe.
yeah,
And they have
and you've also
legacy
got
characters. They have
Yeah.
legacy characters that they have to maintain.
that's it. They have to maintain that trademark.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
so they have
So-
a vested interest in not changing them too much
Right. So
at once. Over time, things change, but they don't. You don't see. It's incremental. It's not all at once. Something happens.
well, except when DC did it the last couple of years and they shot themselves in the foot.
Well,
And
that-
part of that
but see, that-
is the audience demand as well, right?
That
So-
proves my point. Is
Yeah.
that by going, they're seeing this as an example. By going too quickly in changes like this, they've lost some market share. So I mean, they went from almost equal to Marvel to now being almost half of what Marvel was. So yeah, but being in the independents, most of the time you own the characters yourself.
Yeah.
The
Correct.
creator does, which gives them an incentive to push the envelope, make it more interesting, maybe even do wild and crazy, changes in their little universe
Mhm.
that you could never ever do at Marvel or DC. So, fortunately, some folks have an outlet that's got a bigger share in Image. Image is quite willing to push the envelope. You just take a look in previews and see all the different kinds of stuff they're publishing. You get an idea that at least they're a little more open than the big two are.
Yep.
So that's why I still consider them independents. They still have some of that adventurous,
Right.
self-owned ooze going for them.
Yeah,
So-
creator ownership is one of the huge aspects of indie comics, is that the creators, they can maintain their own rights to the work, and which gives them more creative freedom. They don't have
Yeah.
to work within a framework. That's the huge draw. It's also a huge risk, because
Yep.
the entertainment industry mines ideas, intellectual properties, not only from the big two, but they data mine through the independents. I mean, that's where you get The Walking Dead and Umbrella Academy and Men in Black was and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those were all independents.
Invincible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it can either work out incredibly well for the creator, or they can be taken to the cleaners. You know, you have to be very smart about that. You don't have the cadre of lawyers behind you like the big two, that they're going to climb through all of the legalese and make sure that you're not going to get stabbed in the back, or they're not going to. One big
Well,
thing
and
that they do is
those lawyers have time to look at that stuff,
Yeah.
whereas you're busy. If you own the character and you're writing and or drawing it, you're busy doing that part of it, and you can't always focus on that legal aspect of. If somebody infringes on your trademark or copyright, you've got to stop what you're doing and put your focus on trying to run that stuff down. Whereas if you're at the big two, let the lawyers do that. So, yeah, that's the risk that
Yeah.
you run.
And one
Somebody
of
can
them,
rob you.
this is my own personal opinion now, is that taking an option out on an intellectual property, which sounds amazing. You can say, Hollywood came to me and they took an option out on my book, but that means they could sit on that puppy for, you know,
Yeah,
the
and keep
option runs
somebody
out
else
after a
from
while.
getting it.
Right. The option will run out after a while and somebody else can option it. But during that time, what if your property becomes this mega popular thing and they've got the option on it, you know, and they bought it for a paltry, you know, whatever, $50,000 or whatever. And all of a sudden it's this big deal and you've optioned it for 50,000. It's a gamble.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
it could go nowhere and you've gotten 50,000 out of it. You know, you can't tell.
Yeah. I've worked on books that got touched and almost optioned for movies and such, and I just don't get excited about it. I've heard there have been other occasions where books I've worked on, Hollywood's looking at what we're doing. I'm going, don't count your chickens until they're out of that egg. Don't count until they hatch, man, because I've seen
And even
it.
then, the foxes
and
may come and
even
eat
then,
those
you
chicks.
could still get screwed. You know, and you just have to be. You almost have to be in this, and this is the way I'm feeling about it these days, because I can afford to. Is I'm doing it because I enjoy doing it. I can't see doing anything else at this point. I love creating comics. It's what I've always wanted to do my whole life. I'm very happy doing it. If one of something I worked on gets optioned and I get some of the money out of it, whoopee, yay, well, bingo.
Cherries on the sundae.
But if it doesn't, I'm just as happy. You never know. You spin the wheel, and wherever that ball lands, that's it. You know, it's a roulette wheel.
So I was just thinking about something interesting about the independents, and it's the guys who make it in the big leagues, the guys who make, you know, they get into Marvel, DC, maybe even Image or other corporate books. And it's very interesting. And then they decide they get the itch that they want to produce their own book. For some reason, when they're in the corporate space, they're absolutely brilliant. Their stuff is like, everything's hitting on all cylinders. Everything is like, they're like top-notch books. They know how to tell a story. Everything is like awesome. There's like this tightness and a compactness to what it is they produce. And then they decide that they want to step out into the independent space to kind of stretch their legs or whatever it is that they want to do, or they've had an idea that's been kicking around for, 15, 20 years, or they just want to get it out and they put it out there, and it's just not good.
So
like the art is like, yeah, okay, but it's missing something. It doesn't have the same je ne sais quoi that they have in the
So what's the
And
element? What's the
so
element that's missing? What's the element that's missing?
um,
You know, Barb.
An editor.
You've worked with them. Yes,
the
editor.
editor, yeah,
Yeah, who is a manager and he's the sheepdog. He's the border collie who runs around the creator and kind of herds him in the right direction. You take that border collie away, and the sheep are just going to wander off wherever they want. That's what happens with creative people, because many of us, most of us, are not self-disciplined enough.
You
I
think I
mean,
turned divinity out just the way I wrote it down? Oh, no. No, I send it to Tom Mason.
yeah.
And and then he shreds it, and then I rewrite it, and then I send it back to him, and he shreds it some more, and then it goes back.
So then
Yeah.
what happens in the art process with the pencils? So you send it to the script to the penciler. The penciler does what? Do they do thumbnails for you, or do they just send you
Oh,
the
yeah.
finished page? Oh, they do
No,
thumbnails.
They
Okay.
do thumbnails for me, and I make the edits on that because I've been in this industry for 35
Right.
years.
Okay.
So I can edit the art.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I
So
am
so
not
you
a professional writer, or I haven't been. And so I need somebody to edit my work. I
right.
don't turn it out just the way it comes out of my head.
Right.
I'm not that experienced.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So even as an independent artist, I have an editor go over my work.
Right. So there's an editorial process. Yeah.
You bet.
So yeah. So editorial process is really good. But the other thing that ends up happening is when you have someone's looking over your shoulder, so to speak, there's also something about upping your game, right?
Yeah.
You want to kind of show off or step. Like I find like if I have somebody that I'm trying to impress, I do better work, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You've got someone. You're getting immediate feedback.
Yeah.
Is the important thing.
Yeah.
It's when I am fortunate that I've been in the industry long enough that if somebody would, Roland asked me to do this project I'm doing with Barb, and he just gave me the script. He knew what kind of things I could do, so therefore he handed it to me and knew that I could take it and run with it. Now, if any input that I've gotten from him has been helpful, but he's been very mostly hands off with it, because he knows what he's going to get from me.
Mhm.
When you're working with someone who hasn't been in the industry very long, they're just now breaking through, having someone to kind of, okay, this is good, but you could tighten it this way. You need a little bit of molding and people showing you the ropes in order to get your art focused in the right direction. So, but that comes with time.
I have a couple of pencilers that I've worked with that will have me go over their pages, even though I'm not working with them. I have them go over their pages and make suggestions. And I should put an addendum to the editorial thing there. Cassisi also edits Divinity, so I have actually two editors that go over my scripts for Divinity and shred them. So I'm getting two different editorial opinions because as good as I am, or as long as I have been at the art business, I've only been at the writing business for 5 years. So, and that's not long enough to think I know everything.
It takes a while to really get to the point where it's going to come. And to my mind, the important thing in comics is the story, is how it everything else comes out of that. The art comes out of the story itself. I get more excited about a well-written story handed to me than I do when it's, okay, yeah, I'll put this one out, but wow, I really like this story. I'm going to put, it's a synergistic thing. If the writer gives me a good story, I'm going to try and give him good art back. So it starts becoming this. The way I worked with R.A. Jones back in the 80s and 90s was he would send me a kind of a page. He would hit the beats on each page, and I would send him back the artwork, and he would then script it. And it was always I call it synergy. It was more than its parts. It was bigger because of the two of us working together like that. I think the X-Men with Chris Claremont and John Byrne was like that. I don't think either of them was as good afterwards. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby on the Fantastic Four, especially, was that was a synergistic, uh, incredible book. And anything Stan Lee did after that and Jack Kirby did after that didn't have quite the same level. Occasionally, Jack Kirby would really hit it, but the dialogue was never as good as what Stan was giving him. So it's that, yeah, it's the bouncing off of each other that's important.
All right, I'm going to throw some more numbers at you guys.
Uh-oh.
Yep. The global comic book market, global. Yep. In 2023, produced about $1.3 billion. That's 2023. The market is projected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 4.9% between 2024 and 2032, which means it will reach a value of about 1.98 billion by
So almost 2
2032.
billion. So almost 2 billion.
Yep. Now,
Almost double.
Now, according to most sources, the U.S. holds approximately 40% of the global market shares in comics. Asia is huge, but according to most sources, the U.S. has about 40% of the comic book market, which puts the U.S. market at around $520 million. Now, these are my own crunching numbers, by the way, which puts the U.S. around about $520 million annually in 2023. Now, that would mean that 30%, which is what the independent market share is, would mean that the independents are making $156 million in the U.S.
That ain't chump change.
No, that isn't.
In the U.S.
Oh.
So exactly, that is not chump change. That is a significant impact on the market.
Yeah.
Where's mine?
So, yeah. So we have a couple comments. I don't know. Did you put these up, Barb, or no?
I just put this one up.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah.
So, you want to go ahead and read it out?
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems the last decade or so, the editors at the big two have less experience and understanding of art and story, whereas the independents is experienced artists and writers being turned. Yeah.
Yes.
Turned to for editing.
Turned for editing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then David Rios here says that he agrees with Rob on the bouncing off of each other. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a synergy. It's a synergy, definitely.
Yeah. So
156 million.
Yeah. So
that's that's not bad.
Yeah. So I'm going to comment on. So when I was doing research into comics because I wanted to get into comics in a big way in the early 90s, and it's always been a dream of mine to produce my own stuff. So I started looking at how to print comics and all that kind of stuff, and looked at the scenarios. And back then you did not have the option to do what you can do in the independents today.
Print on demand?
Yeah, so print on demand, like our friends at Kablam and Indie Planet, where you can go and look up a whole bunch of indie books if you wanted to. That you can now go and get those books independently printed and have it like as little as one book. I wanted to get this out of my system, and I get the one book printed, and then you can show it off to your friends and family or whatever, or you could try and sell it or whatever you want to do. But back then, as an independent, and you wanted to print a minimum print run, you had to do a minimum print run of 5,000 to 10,000 copies, and you had to go through somebody like Quebecor. Quebecor was a giant printing company up here in Quebec.
Yes.
I called them and talked to them, and I found out that these guys are printing everybody, and I was like, oh my goodness.
They were.
Like,
I remember that.
And then I discovered
they had a good price line. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So in order to get you wanted to get your books down to like about 6 cents a book or something like that. You could get to some ridiculous low price, but you had to get 10,000 copies or whatever. And
Yeah.
so I heard about these independents who would go and print their books, and then they ended up with like thousands of copies sitting in their garage, and that they couldn't get offload, right? So, but
Yeah.
then I did a bunch of math, and what you ended up determining was you had to sell a certain amount of copies to get a break point, right? And if
Right.
you the way I viewed it was, well, okay, if you can sell 3,000 copies and you made your money back,
Mhm.
and then maybe made a little extra on top, then you just, all the rest of the books you either give away or you just burn them, right? So,
Yes, Mr. Room, 150.
Mhm.
That is
He
revenue.
makes a very good point. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, that is revenue, but that still counts for market share. We
Right.
were talking about market shares.
Yeah.
Yes, what we make. That's a whole different. That's a whole
Yeah,
different
That's a whole
That's a
different
conversation.
whole
matter.
other.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and that brings up a very, very good segue. Thank you for letting me segue into my next little thing here, and that is the challenges of being an independent publisher. So we talk about having 30% of the market share, but that's overall. When you're talking about being an indie publisher like Silverline, one of the biggest struggles is visibility.
Yeah.
Visibility and distribution. You have limited resources, so you don't have a lot of money for advertising. So you have to depend on social media is the big source for um, for visibility these days, and that means a lot of work. Fortunately, we are very fortunate to have an amazing social media manager, and that's BJ Mann, Roland's wife. So we lucked out very much that way. So in that
Yeah. We got
respect,
a twofer in Roland and BJ.
yes, we have a head honcho editor and the social media director, wrapped up in one neat package. That's one of the major limitations. You have limited resources compared to a major publisher who has a corporate purse strings. So you've got to come up with your own. And again, being the chief financial officer for Silverline, I see the challenges that we face, which I'm not going to share with you guys.
It's scary. It's scary.
Yeah, and
It can be.
you
It's
struggle
overwhelming.
to compete with shelf space, not only in brick and mortar stores, retail stores, but you also in bookstores, and you're competing against the dominance of digital platforms like webtoons. So being an indie publisher is a tough road to hoe, and yet we keep making these little gains. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 30% of the market share. And I think that we keep chipping away at the big two, and it's becoming more and more of a level playing field. I don't think it's ever going to become upside down, but I think
No,
we're
but
going to
we're
balance
headed
out.
that way. We're headed that way.
I think it's going to balance out into an even split eventually, because I think there's always going to be some diehard,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I still get my Iron Man
Superman hasn't
comics.
lasted this long for no reason.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
still get Iron Man comics. That's the only one of the my books from the big two I still buy, but I gotta have my Tony Stark. But all the other books I buy are indies. So thoughts on that?
Nope. No. I can't come up with anything that's much different from what you just said. You said it very well.
Well, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I think if the indies start making characters that are iconic and stick out, and that people can grab onto, and get some clout happening, I think you're right that we could end up with a 50-50 split, the indie market versus the big two. A lot of it boils down to presentation, right? If the indie stuff is looking like scribbles, well,
And there are some of that out there.
I mean, there's some of it out there, and some of it's
Oh, yeah.
important, and some of it
Yeah,
has
you go through Indie
relevance and
Planet,
meaning.
You're gonna find some of that. You're gonna find
Yeah,
some
but on the flip side, I mean, there's some guys that are
spectacular stuff. Yeah.
there's some other guys that are producing stuff that is iconic and
She,
significant,
Absolutely.
and you know,
Stunning
Lady
stuff.
Death,
yeah, well, like,
Yeah.
like
Cat and Mouse,
like that sticks out, right? Like,
right? Well, Cat and
um,
Mouse has been around since the 80s, so yeah,
yeah.
it is
So,
iconic.
yeah. So it's interesting.
It's difficult. And I mean, when we talk about indies, we're talking about everything from Boom and Dark Horse, which is considered underneath. I'm not counting Image because Image is right up there in 12, almost 13% of the market by themselves.
Mhm.
But everything under Image, all the way down. So you were talking like Dark Horse and IDW and Boom, all the way down to that single creator putting out that one book on Kickstarter once a year.
Yeah.
They're an independent, they're not a publisher. I guess you could call them a publishers. It's a one-man operation, but they still count. They're still producing. The problem is with all of that, it's hard to stand out in a crowded field. You got a wheat field full of independent publishers, and that one wheat stock, it's hard to stand out in that crowd. So you have to truly have something remarkable. And yet there's those those people that are mining for that gold nugget. And they find those gold nuggets.
It comes down to luck as much as anything, a lot of times.
And word of mouth.
And here's what I call luck. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. You've done all the work to get it to the level that it can be noticed, and once that opportunity comes along, you can grab it because you've put in all that preparation of getting it to that level where it can be appreciated. So it's a lot of work to get it to that point. But there's that last little element of, are you in the right place at the right time? And that comes down to chance. So
yeah, the old saying, it takes 20 years to become an overnight sensation.
And the Beatles weren't the Beatles overnight. They went to Hamburg and played, what was it, 10,000 hours of nightly grinding away at it. And when they left, they were a second-rate band, and when they came back, they were the best band in the world. That's how it works. You have to keep at it and put in the work and become good at it. And it's not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. You have to constantly try and improve. You can practice all you want at being bad, and you're still going to be bad. You got to practice to get better. So, and that's where those editors come in. They can always help push you in just the right direction to get better. So,
what are you typing away there, Martin?
I'm looking up who are the independent comics today.
Doing a Google.
Yeah.
You're going to come up with, Image, Dark Horse, IDW. There's a bunch of them, but again,
wow,
they were Teen Beatles.
Well done.
Oh, was that
well done.
Round of
Well
applause.
they were Teen Beatles?
Well
Oh yeah.
Well done.
If anyone doesn't know, Teen Beatle.
Way to go. That was a good one.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Teen Beatles.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow. So
lovely.
I just looked up the independent comics market, and IDW and Boom and Dark
Like-
Horse are in the list of independents.
Arctic
And
Press.
there's I didn't realize that there were so many.
Yeah.
There's just like, okay, let's see. There's a Wave, Blue
Pick
World,
up a copy
Aardvark
of
Anaheim,
previews
Abrams Comic Arts,
and just
Action
look how many
Lab
pages
Comics,
are in it.
Aftershock Comics, Black Mass Studios, Blue Juice Comics, Boom Studios, Caliber Comics, Class Comics, Comico, Continuum Comics, Desperado Publishing, Devil's Due, Diego, Drawn and Quarterly, Dynamite Entertainment, Emerald Stars, Harris Comics, Hyperworks, IDW Image, In Planet Studio, Malibu, which
Well,
was
see,
around.
some of these guys are already have already gone out of business.
Yeah.
Malibu.
Mhm.
Marcosia,
Malibu's gone, unfortunately.
NBM Publishing, Now Comics, Oni Press, Paper Cuts,
Oni.
on and on. Wow.
Some of these are
They're
now has been long gone.
Valiant, Viper,
Pay me my money.
Zine Scope.
I'm sorry, he already spent it by going to Bermuda.
so
Yeah.
there. I mean, there's quite a few publishers out there. Much more than I
Just
expected.
pick up a
So-
copy of previews or go online and look
Yeah.
look at previews and see how many there are. And it's A to Z. You've got Cenozoic. Cenozoic is
Yeah,
isn't it?
Xenozoic
That's the
Tales.
last one. Yeah, Xenozoic Tales, which is the last one in previews. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
You know, and you just brought something else up. Is that for the longest time, it was like pulling teeth to get into diamond distribution.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I used to Capital Distribution was the best company. I used to love them. They're local here. They were local, but they went under.
Mhm.
They were
Yeah.
great people to work with. But Diamond, for the longest time, they wouldn't take you unless you had a certain market share.
Yeah.
Because you were
Yeah.
you were too small.
If you couldn't sell a certain number of comics, they wouldn't allow you in.
Right. But since Marvel and DC have gone to their own distribution companies now, they have opened up their guidelines or
Criteria.
their criteria to
yeah.
get into, which I think is excellent. We need more companies to pick from.
Yeah, I wish they had opened up more like that
Yeah.
before this, because I think the industry would have been much better off than it is now had they started doing that earlier. But that hindsight's 2020.
That's right.
Zetascope, thank you. That's
Yep.
the word I was looking for.
And Argo Comics is absolutely right. There's a lot of companies, even some of the larger companies are going to Kickstarter. I've seen Dark Horse Comics on Kickstarters. That is a very good point. Not all of the companies, obviously not all companies are going to go through previews. But I'm kind of amazed at some of the companies, the larger companies who are actually going through Kickstarter. Or crowdfunding.
Or GoFundMe.
yeah.
or-
Fund My Comics, which is
Or
who
Fund
we
My
use.
Comics is what we're on now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it took us years to get into the Diamond catalog, which we are now, folks. We are in the Diamond catalog. Please have your retailers ask your retailers to carry Silverline Comics. I don't think they'll be disappointed. I mean, we put out a good product.
Yeah, we do, because we love comics.
Yeah, but it took us
But-
5 years to get into the catalog. It
Yeah,
took us
and-
5 years of plugging along in order to make a name large enough
And that's a
for
catch-22
Diamond
situation.
to carry us.
Yep, it's a catch-22 situation in that I've mentioned to Roland that he ought to come up and go to and set up a table at Planet Comic-Con to get some interest built in Silverline in the middle of the country where I live in Kansas City. And he said, I have contacted them, but he said the question was, are you in Diamond? Are you in previews? And at that point, no, they weren't. And the promoter who I know very well, and I understand why he does this. He goes, well, I can't justify bringing you in, having you in the show if you're not in there. It won't. No one will pay any attention to you, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Perpetuating.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but now that we're in previews, hopefully he can start breaking that wall down. Because what needs to be done is we have to get out into those areas, because Rollins is in Florida and he's got that area
Sewed
saturated
up.
with Silverline. That's all sewn up. But you need to get into the rest of the country and make some appearances and break down a few walls. And the only way you can do that is go to conventions or go to things that where you could promote. And so it's a catch-22. If you're not in previews, nobody's going to pay any attention to you. But how are you going to get into previews if no one's paying any attention to you?
Yep.
So,
It's
yeah,
a catch-22. Flip City Magazine's good for you. Exactly. We did it for 5 years. We published for 5 years before we could get in. We started at the beginning of this year. We started previewing, going into the catalog. They finally accepted us. So yeah, it takes about 5 years of study publishing before it seems like before they'll take you. Good for you.
Yep.
Isn't that is a good accomplishment. So anyway, you are very, very right. It's a catch-22. It's like it's the same as being an artist, where the big thing is to get published.
Yeah.
Well, the editor wants to know, have you ever been published before? Well, no. Well, you need come back when when you get published. Well, how can I get published if you don't
If
hire
you
me?
won't hire me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little easier these days because
Thank
you
you.
can self-publish. You can put out you can put out your own book, and then you can hand that to a publisher and go, here's what I can do. Here's what it'll look like in published form. So if you do that, you better make sure it's really good.
Print on demand was a huge turning point in the indie
I think so.
industry.
I agree. And yeah, and the kablam. I've been publishing my own work with them for over 15 years, I think now, something like that, 10 to 15 years, and they do a bang up job, as Roland will say in his little promo piece. They do a bang up job, but you got to give them good stuff to print. They'll print it, but if you want to make an impression with someone you're trying to get a job with, you better do your best work. Put your best foot forward to really show off what you can do. So
We'll have to do sign language for Martin. Because his earphones died.
Uh-oh. Can you hear us?
Well, anyway, it's time to wrap up our show. It's time to wrap up our show for the night anyway. And for all these indie artists out there, push that envelope. Keep pushing that envelope. Make those brand new ideas come to life and find your niche. Don't stop, because indies are where the freshest ideas can be found. I think it truly is. I believe in the indie market, because that's where you're going to find the best, the freshest, the brightest ideas.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. All right.
And yeah, I gotta get to where I'm supposed to be here.
Push the right button. Push the right switches.
Last 3 minutes because my headset just went kaput.
That's okay. We're just saying, keep at it, everybody.
Yes.
Turn out those envelope pushing comics, those fresh ideas.
Get out there to Hamburg and play those 10,000 hours worth of music like John Paul, George, and Ringo did.
That's
So
right.
Go for it, man.
All right. And as we like to say here at Silverline, make
mine Silverline.
Never mind. Stream it.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline. You heard me.